I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation Radio program. I'm your host, Clint Richardson, and the date today is Friday. What is the date? Friday, December 13th, 2013. Hey, got a special guest today by the name of Marc Stevens. He can be found at his website, which is markstevens.net. And I wanted to also tell you that on Monday and Tuesday, we're going to have a very, very special guest by the name of Hal Anthony, who I've interviewed before, but not on this station. We're going to be talking about the mining law. He's one of the true pioneers of the old mining laws. Actually has claims and has created a mining town out there in Oregon. Mining district, excuse me. And we're going to be covering the Lieber Code in triplicate, explaining how that all works, which sort of ties into what we're going to be talking about today, because unfortunately we truly live in it's a strange system. It's a voluntary system, and yet it's not. It's it's a system of government under military rule. Of course, the opposite of military rule, or the peaceful version of martial law, is military rule. The second we get out of line, or at least enough of us do, then you see the martial law, or the violent aspect of such a military occupation by the Central Corporation of the United States. Anyway, welcome to the show, Marc. So pleased you could be here today.
Well, thanks, Clint. I appreciate the opportunity. It's good to talk with you again.
I know. It's been a while. Marc was one of my illustrious guests at a conference I held here in Salt Lake City, one of the worst possible places to try to do any activism, but it was a good conference. Not a lot of people came, but a success in every other way, anyway. And Marc was a wonderful speaker, was then and is now. Now, can you please tell people what is the No State Project? When you say no state, what do you mean?
Well, back years ago when I first started the show here on RBN, John had asked me to do that, and I had to come up with a name, and that's just what, because the Free State thing was still kind of new, the Free State Project, and I didn't like the idea of that name because I didn't believe that, states are fictions, like corporations, as you know, and I just thought it was better to be the No State Project, to show that the idea of nations and states and cities and citizens and whatnot were just fictions. So it's the No State Project, to bring about a world, or to educate people to see things more as they are, that there's just people, that there are no cities and nations and things like that. It's just silly.
Well, what would people do without the nanny state, though?
I don't know. The big thing is who build the roads. I'd rather go.
It's one of the most common questions, isn't it?
It's like, wait a minute. We're talking about giving up trillions of dollars in waste and corruption and mass murder and genocide, and you're interested in the roads.
Yeah. But don't you understand, Marc? It's that piece of paper that built the roads. Don't you get it? It's that fictional entity. It somehow got legs and spreaded arms and picked up some tools and built the road.
There's a wonderful thing that someone put together based on the scene from Office Space where they're going through, the two Bobs are talking to each individual. It's like, what is it you say you do here? You know, it's like, well, does government pay for the roads? No, the government actually forcibly takes the money from people and, you know, to pay for the, well, does the government then build the road?
Yes. Is that the alien, the little cartoon alien talking to someone trying to explain our system?
No, this was just, it had to do with the Office Space, you know, with
okay. Well, someone made something similar. It might have been the same thing where it was a human, a citizen, trying to explain our form of government to an alien.
Which is excellent, yes. That was
hilarious thing.
I think that was based on something that Larkin Rose had written, and it was, that is, I recommend that if you haven't seen it, that is excellent. I wish I remembered the name of the user, but you should be able to find it easy on YouTube.
Now, let me just reiterate here that the state, when we say the word state, so we're talking about government, period, end of story. We're not talking about anything else. This word is used in various senses. In its most enlarged sense, it signifies a self-sufficient body of persons united together in one community for the defense of their rights and to do right and justice to foreigners. Now, it actually sounds kind of wonderful, but we have to read into it a little bit. It says, in this sense, the state means the whole people united into one body politic. Wait a minute. And the state and the people of the state are equivalent expressions? Wait a minute. So actually, we're not really individuals anymore. When we say the word people, we lose our rights individually and become just a member of the Borg society. That's what state means. In a more limited sense, the word state expresses merely the positive, meaning positive law, or actual organization of the legislative or judicial powers. Thus, the actual government of the state is designated by the name of the state. Hence, the expression, the state has passed such a law or prohibited such an act. Now, state also means a section of a territory occupied by a state, which, you know, anytime you hear a definition like that, anytime the word that's being defined is used in the definition, you know that they're drawing at straws. State also means the section of territory occupied by a state, as the state of Pennsylvania. So, we talked about this, probably, I think it was yesterday, about the enabling acts and the requirements for, quote, the people to form a state, within the territories, and that, there was never such thing as a sovereignty in the state, that it was an agreement to give up all of the lands in the first place. That's why people should read those enabling acts. So by state, and again, when you say no state, you're literally mean, well, do you mean no borders?
Of course. What I'm talking about, if we look at just the facts, what we can observe, what we can prove, what we can verify independently, and what other people can verify, especially with replication, which we'll get, I'm sure, we can get into with a lot of the calls that I make and the work I do in court. You see that there's just people. That the idea of a state being that there's a group of people into a corporation, because a state, if you get into some of the definitions or corporate opinions, that a state is a body corporate and politic, just like the United States, and they're just people. It's like the idea that just what you read. Where is the evidence that the whole body of people, everyone on, let's say, the Eastern Seaboard in 1777 or 1778, that they agreed to anything? Where's the evidence of that? I mean,
what's really funny is that people still say that they live in a republic.
Oy.
And I mean, that's so far from the truth that it's almost ridiculous to think that a republic where you'd have an individual voice compared to a state where there is no individual voice. It's wonderfully delicious irony anyway. All right, folks, stay with us with Marc Stevens. We'll be back.
Wake up, wake up. Wake up and look around you. We're all
folks, welcome back. We're in the Corporation Nation, and with me today is Marc Stevens. Now, I wanted to get into the concept of what exactly is a voluntary society. There's a lot of people out there that promote the concept of volunteerism. They call themselves volunteerists and promote a voluntary society. Now, the problem with that, unfortunately, is that we live in a contractual society. In other words, we agree, although half the time we have no idea that we are agreeing. In other words, we volunteer to follow a lot of the things out there, and we have nice, forceful officers of quote-unquote law to help us remember that we are voluntarily following the rules, with a nice smack on the head. But I wanted to, how do people possibly understand the concept of volunteerism and the voluntary and a voluntary society when let's listen to what Harry Reid has to say. Now, this is an interview, hopefully we have it queued up, interview between Harry Reid and, I forgot who else it was, where he's asking, is the income tax, or any taxation for that, Mary, is it voluntary? And I want you to listen to this Harry Reid, what his response is. Let's play that if we can. Well, I don't hear anything, so there must have been a technical issue, huh? Well, all right. I guess we'll try again in a minute here. Just a second. All right. Well, I guess that's not going to happen right now. We'll get back to that. But now again, I contest that we live in a voluntary society already. So if we're going to actually state that we are going to start or attempt to actually develop and live in a voluntary society, doesn't there have to be at least some rules that say, look, a contract does not mean that a billy club over the head can enforce the contract? I mean, there has to be some form of, I'll say, governance, maybe not government, but governance within even a voluntary society. What do you think on that, Marc?
Well, sure. It's like the actual meaning of the word anarchy is doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers.
Right.
So voluntarists or anarchists, we come from a standpoint that of do no harm, and that it is wrong to initiate physical force or the threat of physical force. That all human interaction should be voluntary or not at all. And that's where so that's why when we look and we examine the society that we live in now, I will disagree that the evidence shows the contrary, that we're not in a voluntary society, because because if you, an example, someone from Canada, when I'm asking, they had no evidence that the Constitution and laws of Canada apply to me just because I'm in Toronto. And their response to that was, well, we do have jails. Like, yeah, but if you're equating a threat of jail with evidence that your laws apply, that's you're getting into the realm of the insane.
Well, it boils down to, I didn't say it's a good voluntary society. I didn't say it's a lawful voluntary society. I just said it's voluntary. Because, let's face it, we're members. Some of us anyway, most of us are members or citizens of that particular body politic. And at the very least, we are presumed to be members or citizens of that. And we are presumed to be willing to follow the law. So the problem is we don't know what those laws actually say, and so we get bound up in a sort of voluntary sense. Even going to prison, when you actually put it into context, is technically a voluntary act, and that's the hard part to understand.
But how so, Clint? How is give an example though of somebody where going to jail is voluntary. I mean, I look at someone like Larkin Rose or even Dean Clifford, who I have, philosophical differences or practical differences in thought. But I don't see, this is something, I've always, seen, heard about and and wanted to challenge. I know it's your show, but we're friends.
Well, no. I want you to challenge me. That's why I said, that's why I want to play this video, but it unfortunately didn't play, because this is the mentality that I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
This is the mentality of the people who enforce the voluntary rules. When you hear Harry Reid tell you what volunteerism is, you start to understand what I'm trying to say, which is that everything technically then is a voluntary act according to these people who submit the rules. I guess we still can't play that video. I kind of was pending on it, or depending on it. But
I'm familiar with it. The interviewer's name is Jan.
I believe so, yeah.
I'm just drawing a blank on his last name. Maybe somebody on my chat could throw that out to me. But I agree that there are people who call themselves government who look at it as if we voluntarily do this. But there's also a tremendous amount of them, like the one I just mentioned from Canada last week, who clearly understand, like the police, this is not a matter of your consent. You do this or I will beat you to death to get your compliance. So and I guess, you look at what happened in Aaron Russo's movie when he asked that one guy about why they pay taxes. Because of the gun.
Yeah. Well, and that's, we promote this a lot, that part of the system is to get you into the system, get you to admit that you are part of the system, that you have a name, that you have all this, and which is why you don't want to just, answer a court summons by going to court. Of course, which is, making the presumption, making an appearance basically on behalf of the bond that you give through your name. But I guess the question I'm trying to ask you, which is very difficult to ask, considering that like I said, if the people think that it's a voluntary system now, in other words, the people that run the system. And they truly, some of them actually believe that it is, that income tax is voluntary, and yet it's mandatory. It's voluntary, yet it's mandatory. So, I don't have to pay my taxes. Well, of course you have to pay your taxes. But is it voluntary? Well, yeah, it's voluntary. See, it just goes back and forth. And there's, I think you referred to it as a circular logic that doesn't really have any concept in reality. So, this is, I guess my question to you is, how do you prevent that from happening, again, through contract in a system with no state?
Well, I think a lot of people are pretty much aware that it's pay or go to jail. I don't know if we can quantify, because I know in my experience, and I deal with these types of people every day, that unlike Harry Reid, who may have just been doing that because he was being interviewed, when you talk to them in their office or you talk to them on the phone, there doesn't seem to be too many of them that hold this idea that it's a voluntary system, that you pay taxes voluntarily. Most of them, are very hardcore, psychopath types that understand very well, you do what I say or we will beat you into submission. And I think the average person, at least in my scope of influence, understands very well why they do what they're doing. They get a driver's license to avoid going to jail.
Yeah, it's absolutely. All right, folks, stay with us. Marc Stevens today. We'll be back.
Our supremacy doesn't depend on weaponry. With schools, media, money, and meds, we control every aspect of your life through ideological hegemony. But if you think you need guns to stop tyranny, then what you waiting for? We've already stripped you of your liberty, privacy, civil rights, and dignity. You want some more?
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy, all our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage.
All right, folks.
What this present
We're back.
What it feels like and what it sounds like.
We're going to try to play this video again a different way. Again, this is actually Jan Helfeld. And he's interviewing Harry Reid, and he's asking him a very simple question, and this is the same kind of runaround that we would generally get when we ask the same question. I know Marc has certainly done his fair share of confronting folks with questions similar and then trying to break down the logic or lack thereof. So let's go ahead and play that video. Again, this is a question to Senate Majority Leader, I believe it is, Harry Reid. Let's hear what he has to say.
Argue that governmental action is not forceful, Senator Harry Reid claimed that income taxes are voluntary. If the government is in the business of forcefully taking money from some people in order to provide welfare benefits to others, how will the people whose money is being taken feel about the government?
Well, I don't accept your phraseology. I don't think we force people.
Taxation is not forceful?
Well, no.
It's voluntary?
In fact, quite to the contrary. Our system of government is a voluntary tax system.
Oh, if you don't want to pay your taxes, you don't have to?
Oh, of course you have to pay your taxes. But
well, the government will force you to pay, or they'll fine you or imprison you.
We have a voluntary system. The fact of the matter is that if when you pay your taxes, you see, in many other countries it's not voluntary. For example, in many countries, the government make sure that your employer takes out every penny. Many countries don't file income tax returns.
We have withholding here too, don't we?
Pardon me?
Withholding?
With some programs, yes. But I'm talking about in some countries, European countries as an example, you don't file an income tax return. There is no need to because your employer takes all the money out. That's the difference between a voluntary and an involuntary system. You can't cheat and not pay your taxes.
Right.
But I don't accept your phraseology that you forcibly take money from somebody else and give it to that's the way it is on any program.
Can the taxpayer...
highway program is the same. We take money, we forcibly take money in your phraseology.
But let me ask you this question.
Put people in the army.
Can the taxpayer decide not to pay his taxes if he wants?
He can not pay his taxes.
What will happen?
He's subject to civil and criminal penalties.
They'll put him in jail. They use force against him. He pays. Everybody pays taxes under threat of jail or fine, under threat of force. In other words, you are forced to pay your taxes, whether you fill out your form voluntarily or whether it's withheld by your employer. You don't have a choice on whether you can pay taxes that are going to be used for welfare programs. You can't make that choice.
Well, but the reason our system is called a voluntary tax system, and I recognize, that ultimately you can't cheat in your taxes, but we have many provisions in the law they don't have in most countries. We have deductibility for home, interest on mortgage payment. They don't have that in most countries. We have deductibility for certain excessive expenses as it relates to health, doctors, hospitals. We have all kinds of tax, some people call them loopholes, but others would call them incentives for people to do business. And that's why you're not forced to pay certain tax. There are ways, if you decide to buy a home.
You can decide not to pay taxes in the United States?
I really don't understand what you're trying to get at. The point of the matter is...
Because you objected to my phraseology. You say that the government isn't forcefully taking money from some people to provide welfare benefits to others. And in fact, that's what it's doing, because all taxation is forceful. It's backed up by physical force. If you don't pay your taxes, the government will intervene with you forcefully. So you don't have a choice. It's not voluntary. You can't decide not to pay and not suffer a consequence. If you don't pay, you go to jail. So you're forced to pay.
You don't go to jail.
Because you objected to my phraseology. You say that the government isn't forcefully taking money from some people to provide welfare benefits to others. And in fact, that's what it's doing, because all taxation is forceful. It's backed up by physical force. If you don't pay your taxes, the government will intervene with you forcefully. So you don't have a choice. It's not voluntary. You can't decide not to pay and not suffer a consequence. If you don't pay, you go to jail. So you're forced to pay.
You don't go to jail. Some people go to jail. There are all kinds of civil penalties. If you don't pay your tax, you pay interest and you pay penalties. The fact of the matter is, our system is a voluntary system.
Yeah,
I just love that. Of course you have to pay your taxes. We have a voluntary system. You can't cheat and not pay your taxes. A citizen cannot pay his taxes if he wants. He's subject to civil and criminal penalties. The fact of the matter is our system is a voluntary system. Come on, folks, doesn't that make perfect sense to you? Don't you understand what it means to live in a voluntary system of taxation? I mean, come on. That should have been an open and shut case, right? That should have told you and explained everything. What do you think, Mark? I mean, wasn't that a perfect explanation of our voluntary tax system?
Yeah, the thing is, when it's things like that, if we bring up the truth and what's really happening, they threaten us with psychological exams, and yet this guy is taken serious enough to still be the Senate Majority Leader. I mean, and I'm looking at this is. Yeah, the guy is like a typical politician. He's a pathological liar, and Jan was way too patient with the guy.
Well, yeah, well, that's that imposed respect. We don't really know where it comes from. But, well, let me ask you, Mark. Let me ask you some basic questions. Again, just to play devil's advocate, isn't the fact that I voluntarily, for one thing, I'm using copyrighted government script. I'm using a dollar as a legal tender. It does not belong to me. It belongs to government, and for the privilege of its use, I must therefore pay taxes. Also, I file a tax return, which is basically a contract stating that, yes, I will pay taxes.
What's a contract to pay taxes?
It was the 1040, right?
Well, where there's the evidence, as far as I know, it's still a felony not to file the return. So it's not voluntary, so it's not contractual. And the idea that, so you had the magic words there when you mentioned about the Federal Reserve note. You said legal tender. So if you look at it from a practical side, and I've had Bernard von Nothaus on the show, and I've met him, and nice guy. We know from practical experience, historical evidence, we have to use Federal Reserve notes. Otherwise, we are deemed to be domestic terrorists. That anything that we use outside the Federal Reserve System is considered a threat to the system and a unique form of domestic terrorism. That came directly from the FBI and was also parroted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ann Tompkins in particular. So now these are things that are forced on us. Try to pass your own notes. Try to come up with your own medium of exchange and see what happens.
Well, and I will take what you just said and reiterate my warning to people about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a Trojan horse for a cashless society, and I know that a lot of people are very excited about it. But there's a lot of information about Bitcoin that people really need to know, like the fact that government is basically going to take it over very soon, the fact that it's completely trackable. So, according to what you just said, the fact that Bitcoin is being so graciously accepted by government should be a frightening, prospect for people. So I again issue a warning on Bitcoin that, it's more dangerous, I think, than any other possible thing out there, a Trojan horse leading to a cashless society. And I think you're right. You're talking about undermining a system of enslavement through this debt that we call the U.S. dollar, definitely.
Yeah, it's because you're forced to do it. If we look at them as just people, and we don't accept that they're corporations, they're just people. And I tell you, Clint, from personal experience, I did a hearing for someone up in New Hampshire, and we did it by video, which was really cool. Because for the first time, doing one of these from my home office here in the fortified compound, I was able to see the reactions to my questions, which I typically don't get. And it was quite something to watch this bureaucrat who was apologizing up and down to me for how he treated me on the phone, because he could now see me, when he was confronted with just how violent his job was. And I got to see the reaction from them when I did my close, and I said, you're just people. I said, you do understand there is no government besides you. You're just ordinary men and women. You have no more right than I do to rule over other people. And it seemed to have a profound effect on them.
So they actually acknowledged it in their own way, basically, through...
Well, yeah, they agreed that they were just people, that the government was just people. It wasn't, so I was able to stop the reification process, for at least momentarily.
We'll be back, folks.
Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love.
All right, so we got to figure out what this word taxation really means. Because, a dollar just gets circulated every day, in just a very short amount of time can generate its own value in taxation. The dollar is an interesting instrument because it goes back to government way more than 100%. They're the created dollar. And so, you'll have 25% income tax, you'll have a 15% sales tax here, and you'll have this cigarette tax here, and just in a few days, that dollar can create a dollar's worth of taxation. We all know the story about how that money doesn't exactly exist to pay that. Otherwise, all the dollars would be out of circulation in almost no time. So it's a very interesting thing. Now, I got a comment here by a listener. He says taxation is not giving money to government. It is already the government's money. You're just confessing the liability or claiming any overage of which you are presumed to owe as a presumed person liable, quote unquote, for the tax. Which is kind of what I'm trying to get at. It's the concept of being a person liable that makes it so that's what confuses people, is how do you not be a person liable for the tax? You're using the money. Mm-hmm. And just the use is considered an action that would be liable to a tax. And of course, you go into a grocery store, they're going to look at you like you're crazy if you want to fill out a form that says I'm not going to pay income or sales tax. So again, that's the confusion actually on my part, and always has been, is the mere act of user seems to be one of the voluntary aspect of taxation.
Well, I've never actually had any experience where somebody who's claiming that I or somebody else was liable for a tax merely because they were using Federal Reserve notes. It's always from a standpoint that you receive them, not just for the mere act of trading with them. So,
well, let me give you another example. Now, we go and we pay sales tax, but in truth, there is no sales tax, because when we use the dollar, we've already paid our tax. When we give a store owner $1, it's the store owner that's receiving the dollar, and therefore it's the store owner that should be paying the tax. Now, of course, government has contracted and allowed the stores to collect the taxes that the store actually owes in the form of sales tax. So it's actually the corporations that should be paying all of this sales tax, but instead they forward that to us. And again, that is a tax for the use of the dollar in or as legal tender, as the, if you will, lawful currency of the United States. So again, we're talking about a seller's tax, not a sales tax. And it's the same thing.
Well, it's not, I don't see that there's evidence that they're contracted to do that. They have to do that because if the store does not agree to collect the tax or to pay to to surrender the tax, then there are men with guns who will not allow them to do business. So this is where you get into the very real problem, where if your employer may not want, and I mean employer in a lay sense, I don't want anyone jumping on me for that, listening. They may not want to comply with a garnishment. They may not want to comply with some kind of withholding order. But what, in my experience, especially when you've got these big companies, there's a very real risk of the IRS shutting the business down. Sure. And retaliating against them. So I've had them tell me, I said, look, we'd love to be able to stand up to the IRS, or we want to stand up to the Franchise Tax Board in California. So, but we got businesses in not only California, but Arizona, we're in Utah. We could have all of our businesses shut down. And it just, what good? So they told me from a practical standpoint, we would like to be able to stand up for our employees, our contractors, but what good is it if the IRS shuts us down in a couple of days and freezes all of our accounts, and then we can't pay anybody? So, the employer or the business, they are just as much of a victim, at least from from how I'm seeing it, as you and I are. They are unwilling accomplices in the theft.
Well, yeah, I mean, the point is that they're actually the ones that owe the tax, and they're putting it onto the customer instead of paying it themselves. But, I mean, if that wasn't the case, then they would just raise the prices to cover the tax they're going to have to pay later. So it's sort of a wash. But the way, like you say, the way that they do it, which is to force the stores to pay tax on their sales, is just atrocious. It's because, like I said, that dollar will create itself in value over and over and over. If that dollar's in circulation for, say, 10 years, I mean, think about how much tax that $1 creates. It's really an amazing thought, actually.
The whole concept of using credit as money is just insane. You start getting to the whole mechanics of the loan, alleged loan, and we have someone that we're following, a friend of the show. He's been on, and we've been able to keep. He's got a number of credit card things thrown out, and he's in the process of getting another one thrown out in Texas, and we're just looking at the craziness that is the mechanics of the alleged loan. And I just describe it this way, that it's all on paper, of course, as you know, and to really illustrate what's going on is you're giving them 2 5s, they're giving you a 10 back and calling it a loan and saying, now you owe me not just 10, but you owe me 20. Reminds me of the Abbott Costello routine, the 2 10s for a 5.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this then, since we're on the subject. What form of currency, money, trade, barter, whatever, would you, if you had your idealistic, way to have a no state, an area that didn't have a state or rulers or anything else, what would be your idealistic currency or mode of transaction?
Well, it would be something that the market, of course, the people in the market individually are deciding what's going to be the most popular. So obviously, it's not going to be just one. And it should be completely decentralized. I mean, it's not something that's imposed by force. So you're going to have a lot of different options to choose from. I think you're going to have things like Bitcoin and Litecoin.
You don't mean competition, do you?
The evils of competition.
Marc, you are evil.
I'm talking about unique domestic terrorism that does not involve violence. Actual voluntary trade. Let the market decide what is the best mediums of exchange, whether it's currency or metals or Bitcoin, cryptocurrency or something else. But I don't have an opinion on what the best would be. I would imagine it would be a combination of barter and metal and things like Bitcoin.
Hey, I got a question for you. Have you heard of the Ubuntu movement, the Ubuntu contributionism?
I am firmly behind that. In fact, the PC that I have right next to me runs Ubuntu, and I think the open source movement is something that is going, together with technology like Bitcoin, open source technology and whatnot, the free exchange of ideas and information, I think that is going to be the undoing of the prison planet that we inhabit now.
Well, besides your sarcasm and wonderful humor, what would you contribute?
What would I contribute?
Yes.
Oh, I'm not a coder. It's definitely something that I would like to learn to be able to do. But what I do contribute, because on my website there, I don't believe in copyrights at all. So the information that I provide on the website is freely available for people to use, and so they could take that technology or that model, and I encourage people to go and test it and go replicate the results.
Yeah, well, the real point is that you can learn. You don't have to just stick to one thing. If you want, you contribute your skills here, you contribute this here. Oh, that music came in loud. All right, folks, we'll be back with Marc Stevens, second hour. We're going to talk about Marc's new book, which I believe just came out here recently, as well as his old one. Stay with us.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Choose the power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite the world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint Richardson. Again, Friday, December 13th. My guest today is Marc Stevens, marcstevens.net. Marc is spelled M-A-R-C, by the way. Marc, I wanted to ask you about your new book that came out, I believe, just a couple months ago. We had, of course, the infamous cult classic, Adventures in Legal Land. A wonderful, wonderful adventure it is. And now we have the new book, which is called Government Indicted. Why don't you tell us about that?
Thanks. Yeah, I was still writing it. When I met you when we came out for the Axiom conference. So far everyone has given me very, very positive feedback. So I think it was worth it. It's just that I spent so much time, Clint, actually, going through the events that are in the book, and so that kind of took away from your time to write it. But everything in Government Indicted, just like Adventures in Legal Land, happened. Unless it's obvious sarcasm, and or I'm using something for humor to illustrate. All the names are real. I even have contact information, especially with the ebook, which is coming in a few months. You'll have so it'll be interactive. You'll be able to click on links. You'll be able to go to the prosecutor or the lawyer's website. You'll be able to verify some of the things, all the things that I've mentioned in the book. Because that's one of the things that I want to do, which is why, and I had Jan Irvin on my show, because I'm so, because I love his work on the Trivium, because that's really all I've been doing all these years is applying the basics of the Trivium. Like to quote Kipling, I keep 6 honest men with me at all times. They taught me everything I know. Their names are who, what, where, why, and how. And so, it's 10 years of experience that have gone into the book to be able to show that there is no government, there is no state. It's just what psychologists call reification. And it's the idea of taking abstract concepts and and acting as if they're real. Like cops believe that there is a state, a literal, actual state that you're in and that you're a citizen and that he has jurisdiction over you because the laws and all that other happy horse crap. And so by
then there's no roads either. Because if there was no government, no one could have built the roads.
Right. That's a common misconception. But I take it from a standpoint of let's start with what we can prove, what can we verify, what can be independently verified, and then using that information to get certain results that can be predicted and that we can then replicate. So what we're able to do, one of the big differences and improvements on Adventures in Legal Land because of the radio show, which of course, thanks to John Stadmiller of RBN that got me started doing that, I was able to then replicate with the government indicted, I can show where I have been able to replicate the results outside of the so-called United States. So we have the same results, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, in England. We've had it in Ireland. We've had even tickets thrown out in Poland. And so I think the material is very solid. I think it stands on its own. And anybody who's a skeptic, which, I think we all should be, can independently verify the information and what I'm bringing out in the book, all my conclusions. Then they can replicate it, and they'll also be able to use what's in the book to predict what will happen in certain situations or when you're trying to resolve problems with bureaucrats.
And where can people get the book?
MarkStevens.net.
Do you sell it anywhere else?
We're working on that. And I'm working on getting overseas distribution because trust me,
the
shipping.
This is kind of like using other currencies. You're going against the whole industry.
Well, the shipping is killer. So I know we're waiting. A lot of people are waiting for the ebook so we can cut the middleman out, and that's coming. It's just that the ebook is a bit more work because there's pictures, there's links, there's like contact information that I didn't necessarily have to put in the paperback. I mean, it's almost 600 pages now. So I made the choice not to put all the contact information in there, but it will be in the ebook and it will be up on the website so that people can freely access that. And we'll have pictures of some of these prosecutors so we could put, so unlike Adventures, we can put a face to the names so you can see the psychos for them, for yourself.
All right, well, I don't want to hog all your time now. You're one of those guests that I know people want to talk to and ask questions to, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the phones. We've got one already here. Art. Of course, Art is famously off the grid, so does not give a geographical location. Art, welcome to the show.
Good evening, gentlemen. Hello?
Hello.
Hey, I was actually calling in to talk about something you mentioned earlier about volunteerism, but also on the Jan Helfield interview with Harry Reid. I thought it was pretty interesting how, when he was questioned about people going to jail for not paying taxes, he said, well, we don't throw people in jail for taxes, and then he turns around and says, well, some people go to jail for taxes. But it's interesting how it's interesting how he talked about, well, in other countries it's not voluntary because they just take it away from you. And go, well, gee, don't they take the taxes out of your paycheck before you ever get your paycheck? Duh, that's involuntary. You don't have a choice. It's not voluntary, and if you don't, you go to jail.
Well, that was also wonderful use of fallacy by comparing it to other systems. What a wonderful compare. Well, look. It's voluntary because we let you exempt yourself from it in some ways.
If it was really voluntary, then you'd get your entire pay, and then you could send in whatever you felt you could afford to send in to help the cause. But being a volunteer, this whole concept of volunteerism, I've always fancied myself a true blue hardcore anarchist. I don't believe in rulers, but I do believe in rules, and those rules are based upon simple common sense and respect for the others who live around you. But I'm also, after, long hours repeatedly talking with people like Lark and several other various hosts, that I shared the airwaves with over the years when I was doing talk radio. I've come to understand that in many degrees, in many respects, I'm a volunteerist. And when people ask me, well, what exactly is that? I tell them, well, it's pretty simple. Don't expect anything out of me that I don't freely and willingly offer. If I come and say, here's what I have, can you use it? Who needs it? I'm offering it. That's volunteering what I have, and you're welcome to it. Beyond that, if you come and you ask me and I say no, that's it. End of discussion. Volunteerism is, everyone respecting everyone else to the degree that you expect nothing out of anyone other than what they are freely willing to offer you. If they don't offer it, then you better ask for it. And if they say no, end of discussion. Back off. Leave them alone. Period.
Mark, do you have a specific definition for volunteerist?
Well, voluntary, I agree. I like how Art put it, and I've gone on many shows that weren't friendly to the concept of anarchy. And I said, look, I'm an unashamed, unabashed, admitted anarchist. I don't believe in rulers. And that, Art said, if it's not voluntary, that it shouldn't happen. And so I just all human interactions should be voluntary or not at all. Do no harm.
All right, we'll be back. Keep that thought. Art, stay with us if you like. Stay with us.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Well, maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn, and so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? In the garden of your mind. You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind. In the garden of your mind. It's good to be curious about many things.
All right, we're back with Marc Stevens.
All you have to do is...
Of MarcStevens.net, and of course his books, Adventures in Legal Land, and his newest book, at least 10 years in the making, Government Indicted, which I'm going to get my hands on. There's not a lot of books that I read, honestly, because I go to primary sources. In this case, I have a feeling, correct me if I'm wrong there, Mark, that you are talking about, your primary experience in the courts, with primary examples of the laws and statutes and everything else they try to use against you.
Well, I'm using from a primary, if I am talking about speaking with a particular agent, chances are, and obviously this is a conscious choice for when I did the book, was to include where I had an independent, objective example on the website that people. So, for example, I talk about impeaching a witness and showing that in a tax issue where there was no evidence of jurisdiction, no evidence of any. And you could just, and I had the link in the book, even in the paperback, where you can go to MarcStevens.net and you can hear the entire hearing for yourself, and people can make up their own mind. If this is,
I'll get this right.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I forgot I was hooked in. I was talking to myself here.
Okay.
Well, you use the term, which is a maxim of law. You say fact not appearing is presumed not to exist.
Yes, that's. But that's just basic logic. That's just the basis of rational thought, I believe. And
everything is based on the presumption.
Well, to them, I think it's not necessarily split hairs, but I would say it's based on reification, that they act as if these abstract concepts in their head are real. So through that, I guess they are presuming that you are a citizen, that you, like you mentioned earlier, you gave a list of that, of how they do they just presume that you're a citizen, that you're part of the state, and that's comes from the reification process, that they think this stuff is real. Well, I put the uniform on, and everyone I see within the range of my gun is within my jurisdiction.
Okay, so let's go back to what Art was saying, and you for that matter. And let's talk about anarchy. Anarchy is one of those words that just strikes fear into people, which is just ridiculous, because really, even in the Bouvier's Law Dictionary definition, it says the anarchy is simply, very simply, the absence of all political government.
Yes.
That's it. That's it. And when we say the word political, what we really mean is positive law. Okay, in other words, political rights versus natural rights. Natural rights being negative, or the right to not have something forced upon you. So if you don't have anarchy, you have political rights that say that this can be forced upon you, which is the whole basis of what we're talking about here in volunteerism. In a voluntary state, the concept would be an anarchist state, in the sense that there would be no political rights that could be forced upon you. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, I believe so. And I believe to get back to Art and into what you had said, to elaborate on that, these are the concept of the principle of do no harm and to be voluntary is something that we learn by the time we're 5. And regardless of culture, it seems to be that we understand it's wrong to just walk up and smack people, even if it's just for the purpose because we don't want someone slapping us or attacking us. That's why some people will say, "Well, you can't speak for everybody, Mark." I can't. I don't try to. But like I address in the book, I take it from a standpoint that I've never met somebody that wants to be attacked.
Well, you show me somebody that wants to be attacked, and I'll show you an elephant that can fly. And we ain't talking Dumbo either. But, people ask me for examples of anarchism or an anarchistic society, and I tell them, well, you can look at, prior to the white man coming over here, look at some of your native Indian cultures, the way they used to formulate their structure within their tribes. Look at how the ancient Romanian gypsies were perfect for this, where there really was no governing body, but everyone within that group or community agrees that these are the principles that we're going to live by. And we're going to turn to these, say, 5 or 6 people, that whenever we have a dispute, we will come to these people, we'll present our cases to them, they will make the decision as to who's right, who's wrong, in whatever way it should be settled, and that's it. But beyond that, everyone respected everyone else in every way, whether it be property, person, privacy, you name it. And if you broke any of the rules that everybody agreed to live by, and I mean everybody had to agree on this, it was basically a 100% consensus. Everyone agrees this is how we will conduct ourselves amongst ourselves with each other. And if you couldn't go down that road, you simply went and found another village or community to live in. This to me is the most perfect structure. This way, if you don't like the rules of this particular community, you just move on down the road and find a community that's more to your liking. Called voting with your feet.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out, because a lot of times people will say, well, show me evidence where an anarchist or a voluntary society has worked. And I'm like, well, first of all, I shouldn't have to show you a historical example to show that it's a rational concept. And so I don't remember the name of the actual Latin phrase for the logical fallacy. Maybe you can help me here, Clint. But of trying to put or dismiss a concept or a principle based on a lack of a historical example or okay, and we start with a rational principle. Do no harm. Now, if we agree with that, and I think we all do because we don't want to be attacked, then it doesn't matter if we don't need any more proof than that. It doesn't matter if that we can't point out to a voluntary society from 100 years ago. Or there are examples, but it's not necessary to do that to show that it's a rational concept.
Well, it would be similar to you saying, "Well, it's never been done before, therefore it will work." I mean, it would be the same principle of fallacy. I'm trying to think of the name of that, but I can't. That would be a Jan Irvin.
Yeah.
He'd have it on the top of his head. He'd have it right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be the same principle as, so, I mean, all you're doing is just applying a logical discourse and saying, look, and in my opinion, this might be just my opinion, I don't think you're going for a complete societal change overnight. You're talking about starting communities. No. You're starting about, this has to be a revolution of the mind, not of, quote unquote, the state. The state has to disappear. The state is the group mentality that has got us here in the first place. And that's what needs to go.
Right. And that's why in my book, Government Indicted, it's the concept of government that is the problem. The concept of statism, not any individual actors. And I don't know if Art agrees with this. Maybe he does. We seem to be on the same page. I don't want there to be a collapse of government tomorrow. Because anarchy, an absence of rulers, like Clint, you just said, it's not just a particular state of not having rulers. It's the idea in people's heads that they don't accept the concept.
Right, I would agree with that. And an absolute total collapse of the state overnight, that wouldn't be anarchy. That would be absolute chaos on steroids.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, guys, stay with us. Thanks for the call, Art, and we will be back.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as a US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion. Despite protests and clashes in Athens streets, the IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the term economy entered our language from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. Well, how are we managing? Theories abound, but in practice, does anyone actually know what the...
All right, folks. Welcome back. No, of course, no one seems to know what the hell is happening. It's just crazy out there right now with what's going on in the quote-unquote economy. I always laugh at economists. The concept of an economist is a joke in itself because, of course, it requires a belief in a completely corrupt and just absolutely messed up system, and that it actually has legitimacy. I mean, you can't be an economist, really, unless you have some interest in seeing the system survive. It's just a funny occupation. I was looking at the etymology of the word anarchy. And, if you think about it, you have the word archy, which you can attach to hierarchy, which means an authority. The word archy actually means to rule or a rule, a leader, chief, or ruler. And if you go deep enough, it actually refers to the beginning or origin of rule, which is where you have monarchy, meaning the one God rules, or the vicar of Christ in the Pope and the Queen is the monarchy, the one God ruling over earth. In the temporal realm, you have antarchy, which is actually opposition to government, which a lot of people feel that anarchy is. But when we're talking about anarchy, the word an just means an or without, and so anarchy just basically means a lack of a leader, the state of the people without government. That's an interesting definition, actually, the state of people without government. Now, we're talking about no state. The word state is defined, of course, in many different ways, but here it's referring to the disposition, if you will, of people without a government or without a state. The state of people without a state would be a good way of saying it. So it's, hierarchy means a higher power. Oligarchy means multiple rulers. Monarchy means a single ruler. Why in the heck do you think you need rulers? I guess that's the real question, huh, Mark?
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing most people can come out with, well, who build the roads?
Yes, who will build the roads?
It's absolutely ridiculous when you realize and you say, well, let's go through a little bit of history here. Rome was known as the great road builders, like the Appian Way, and so what was Rome's principle? Those psychopaths called the Senate and the Caesar and the king and whatnot. What was the primary purpose? There was the single most important. The reason why they built those roads was not for commerce or for the average person. It was to get the military from one place to another so they can conquer.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of military in government, isn't there?
Well, it's really one and the same when you think about it. Yeah. I mean, some people will talk about where they're instituting martial law. Well, I don't see the difference. Maybe in degree, there's always been martial law. I mean, I think you mentioned that in the first hour, Clint. That
it's a military rule. There's a reason that they call. The governor they call him in Canada, they call him the governor general. And here we have the lieutenant governor, we have the attorney general. These are all military positions. The only difference, really, and we're going to cover this on Monday and Tuesday as well with Hal Anthony, the only difference between military rule and martial law is that martial law is just is the violent part. As long as you agree to your enslavement, you're under military rule, which is called the civil law. You're civil, in other words, you have civility towards government and towards others, then we won't bonk your head in. But the second you start doing something like forming a free society or forming another currency, well, then that's where the martial law aspect of the military rule, in other words, the violence comes in. So, I mean, like I said, I guess the easiest way to understand it is very simple. If government can claim martial law at any time it wishes, then you're already under it. Simple as that.
I would say that if we look at just the facts and start from there and let the facts, let the data tell, let the data speak, whatever the data says, right? The data tells you the fact that there was never a choice in whether you had government or not. So whether we call it martial law or we call it military rule, you still have men and women that are forcing you to comply and pay them. So you could call it the mafia. You're really so whatever the label we attach, the underlying facts don't change.
Yeah.
So that's why people will say, well, it's admiralty law. Why don't you get it? It doesn't matter. Because at bottom, we're talking about men and women that are forcing you into a certain room on a certain day. Who cares what the title over the door is? What does it matter? What does it matter if there's a flag or not? What does it matter if he's wearing a robe? I've been in some courts where the judge was sitting on a chair on the floor. He wasn't even on a wooden throne. It didn't, it didn't matter.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take let's get our phones again. Let's take Fred in California.
Good evening, Clint.
Hello, Fred.
You doing, man? I'll tell you what. Your show, since I've been listening to it since you've been on, has been such an epiphany. I cannot believe it. I have bought more books as a result of your show, including Black's Law Library. And Marc, I will be buying your book. I'm disabled, and I can't do too much except read. And that's what really got me to RBN. And then Clint Richardson shows up, and oh, my gosh. I watched 30... Go ahead, Clint.
Oh, well, it's funny because I always say I'm a horrible salesman, but apparently I'm doing something right.
Oh, you are. I talked to John the other day, and I said, if you ever pull this guy off the show, I will never listen to RBN again. But I did listen to Dirty Uncle Sam. You might have, I think you referred that on one of your shows. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Bruce Ray Riggs?
Yeah.
Okay, have you listened to it at all?
Just a little.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it's good. It's been a while since I've actually listened to it.
I'm trying to substantiate it. I'm just going through the process of seeing if I can put dots around it. But one thing I did want to bring up with you tonight, you were getting into currencies, and I found it kind of ironic. Here we have, remember Pac Bell got broken up into the baby bells? Because they were in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act?
Sure.
Why is it that the Federal Reserve Bank, as a private corporation, doesn't fall under the Sherman Antitrust Act? Why is it that we can't break up the Federal Reserve, have several Federal Reserve banks, and whoever produces a better product, let's say an asset-backed currency, which is a good start? What do you think about that? And Steve, what do you think about that?
Well, it's Marc, actually. I believe we should do that, and I highly encourage that. I think it is definitely an honorable act of civil disobedience, especially in these days when you do something like that. It has been, and it is a part of the federal government program, these psychopaths, that it is considered an act of domestic terrorism, even though there's no violence involved. So I applaud any, community currency, for example, people using that. Yeah, I'm totally behind that. And I'm more than happy if somebody was doing that to have them come on my radio show, on a regular basis and do what I can through the show and my website to promote that. And I have had people on that were involved with community currencies. I don't like calling them currencies, but just for discussion is fine.
Sure.
So I'm totally yes. Any type of free voluntary exchange that's brought to the market for the market to decide, that is decentralized. Yeah, I can. That's something I can get behind.
Well, the true answer to your question, Fred, would be it's up to Congress. That's the God honest truth. The Federal Reserve Act created it. The Congress created it. In other words, Congress can end it. Congress can do anything they want to it. And while it is private in the concept that government is also private in that concept, in that matter, it is a government organization. It is not private like we think of private corporations like Target or something. So we'll talk about that on the other side. Stay with us. Folks, welcome back. So, to answer Fred's question, one of the problems with is the actual foundation of the question. Well, why doesn't the Federal Reserve fall under the Sherman Antitrust Act? Well, both of those things were created. The Federal Reserve Act and the Anti-Sherman Antitrust Act were created by government. Government's really not going to admit to having a trust over anything, of course, but if you just type in a search, you'll find forms or cases from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, like this one that says the applicability of the federal antitrust laws to bank mergers. So it's actually the Federal Reserve that is deciding on whether banks, as member banks, are in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. You got to understand that the Federal Reserve is a part of government. They do call it an independent agency of government, but that's also what they call the Post Office, Social Security, Securities and they're all Securities and Exchange Commission. They are all administrations or boards, but they're still part of government. That's the confusing aspect of that. So you could not put unless. I don't think you could apply the Sherman Antitrust Act to government itself. That's the ironic part about it. So it would not apply to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve actually uses it as government. That's the kick in the shins, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, are they going to apply the trust laws or the monopoly laws to the bar associations? I mean, it just, it doesn't work that way. And I believe that the evidence historically, you follow the, history for the last 500, years or so, and you can see that you have the same super wealthy elite white people, white Europeans, of course, that own the banks. So I think if that the banks, that the super wealthy have always used, and this goes back to Greece and Rome, and it's always been this way, that the wealthy of society use government as a tool to keep themselves at the top of the pyramid, the hierarchy of society. They are the ones that are prospering from the pyramid, the hierarchy, and they are going to resist, and they are going to fight against any of us who don't comply with that and try to change and bring down the hierarchy of society.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's the age-old truth. Now, there might be some people who would say, no, well, the bankers are Jews, the bankers are this, the bankers are that, but we're talking about white people who pretend to be Jews. That's, it's a bloodline thing, folks. We have to kind of get over that concept that this is a very cooperative effort. Banks are members of the Federal Reserve. They therefore have the privileges of membership. It's that simple. The banks aren't the problem. The banks are the tools that are being used against everything. So, let's see. Do we still have Fred from California? Looks like he might have hung up. How about Jake from Oregon? Welcome, Jake. Oh, no. He hung up too. Well, all right then. I guess patience is not a virtue.
I'm driving your calls away.
Man, unbelievable. Well, Marc, I want to thank you for joining me today. It has been too long. We ought to do this again sometime. Tell people again the name of your books, where they can get them, your websites and everything.
It is markstevens.net is the website. The books are Adventures in Legal Land and, of course, Government Indicted. And the radio show, The No State Project, is live every Saturday. You can hear that at markstevens.net. And, I'm also available for consults. So, I do a lot of what I do during the week, and this is what I do on the show. On Saturdays is kind of like a wrap-up and a continuation of what I do during the week of helping people get attacks dropped and limit the amount of damage that these psychopaths are looking to do to them by engaging the agents in a Socratic questioning method and bringing out that they don't have any evidence. So we have the consultation, we have some scripts, and I do have some motion templates that we use also.
And, of course, your videos are all over YouTube of you confronting people and asking the tough questions to all the agents. Real quick, let's end with the story you were telling me off air with the where you confronted or were simply asking questions of it wasn't the Attorney General, it was the state attorney?
A Deputy Attorney General.
Yeah.
A Deputy Attorney General.
Why were you there in the first place?
Well, I was helping somebody who was being attacked by the IRS, and I had gone in with them to the Bloomington office. I have a video about Jeffrey Wagner, who's an IRS agent, professional liar. It's one of the more recent videos that I did. And, we had asked a question, what evidence do you have that the Constitution, laws, or the code, U.S. code, apply here, and that you have any jurisdiction? And he just responded with the standard lie. That's a frivolous argument. Now, anybody literate in the English language knows that an argument is not a question, or a question is not an argument. And it's just a dishonest tactic that they use to get the focus away from them. Well, he wasn't satisfied with us asking him questions, and he escalated it by bringing his lies of good faith and whatnot to a U.S. attorney named Gerald Wilhelm, who then filed a petition to enforce the summons. So we had asked Mr. Wilhelm on the phone. They call it a meet and confer, which you're supposed to do in court. It's not universal that they always call that. But before, you're supposed to do what you can to resolve things, without court. And so that part of the pretrial, the pre-hearing procedure is you call and try to hammer out an agreement before you go to court. Well, he yelled at us that he would present his evidence in court. So we get to court, and he's directly confronted, where's the evidence to prove the Constitution laws apply? He has no evidence, and he has no witness with personal knowledge. And the judge turns to him and says, well, Mr. Wilhelm, do you have anything to offer? And he says, no, Your Honor, I don't. And so I wanted to still question this man, and I use that in a biological sense only. And so he wouldn't come out of the courtroom, so I questioned him when I see him get out of the elevator. We both kind of get out of the elevator at the same time. This is a big lobby. It's the St. Paul, federal building. And he ignores me at first. I ask him a second. I go, Mr. Wilhelm, I just want to know, what evidence would you use to prove the Constitution laws apply to me? And he freaks out. He turns around, throws his hand in the air, yells out, don't take it, don't come any closer. And now I've got 4 security guards, police, with the hands on the guns, very close to drawing down on me. And of course, it was just a gross overreaction by this weasel, to avoid the question and be able to get away. He puts my life in danger because he can't provide any evidence. And that's the thing. I want to just real quick, Clint, anyone who's a skeptic, if you believe that I'm wrong, that there actually is evidence that the Constitution laws apply to us just because we're physically in what you call the state boundaries, more than happy to call my show or email me with the evidence. I'll even book as a guest and we'll get you on first. Because nobody, Clint, has ever been able to produce evidence the Constitution laws apply to us just because we're physically in Utah or Canada or wherever.
Well, the Constitution's a corporate charter. It's like saying the Constitution of Walmart, the corporate charter of Walmart would apply to someone who works at Home Depot. It doesn't. It's not. It's the wrong jurisdiction. It's for a little tiny piece of land outside of the United States. It's not a state. It's a district. It's a corporation. It has nothing to do with you. We try to tell that people all the time, and one of the ways I'm sure you'll agree, Mark, is one of the ways that a judge or attorney knows that you don't know what you're talking about is if you invoke the Constitution as what gives you rights.
Oh yeah, you obviously have no idea. No rational. There's no rational thought that there's no. Oh, let's put it this way, Clint. I don't want to paint with that broad a brush. There's no critical analysis that has gone into coming out, that statement or leading to that statement. You're just taking what you were told and you haven't critically examined it at all.
I saw it in the movies, therefore it must be true. Hey, thanks, Mark, for joining us. I want to get this out real quick before we run out of time. It's end of the year pledge time again. Pledge drive's on right now. We're looking for donations to the station, to RBN, of course. $100 will receive an RBN t-shirt and an RBN coffee mug. Woohoo! Call today, 800-724-2719. Again, thanks, Mark, for joining me today. MarkStevens.net. Get his new book. Should be good. Take care.